the twin sons of Vera shone down on the city square, casting long shadows across the stone floor. The people gathered in silence, their faces pale, their voices low. No one wished to draw attention. The Krith, towering reptilian rulers with cold eyes and sharper claws, stood in perfect formation. Their armor shimmered in the light, each plate etched with symbols of conquest. At the very center of the square stood Myra. Her arms were pulled tight by metal restraints fixed to four mechanical poles. The machines hummed with energy, waiting for the command to activate. She was young, slender, her skin a faint silver hue that caught the sunlight. Her eyes were wide, not only from fear but from a quiet defiance that refused to break. The Krith had sentenced her for treason. Her crime had been simple. She had refused to carry out their orders against her own people. She had spoken one word of refusal, and for that, they declared she must be quartered in front of all. The punishment was cruel, designed to break both body and spirit. The crowd did not cheer. They did not jeer. They only watched in silence. The Krith allowed no pity and no resistance. Parents held children close, telling them not to look, yet none could turn away. Every citizen knew the sight, and every one of them feared it might one day be their own. Myra's breathing grew fast, her chest rising and falling. She tried to calm her heart, but the sound of the machines filling with power was impossible to ignore. The restraints trembled with hidden strength. In moments, she would be pulled apart. Her mind screamed for hope, but hope felt distant, like a star far beyond reach. The Krith commander stepped forward. His scales were a deep red, and his voice rumbled like stone grinding against stone. "This is the price of defiance," he declared. "This is the fate of those who stand against us. Let all who watch remember." His hand hovered over the control that would trigger the execution. Myra closed her eyes. She thought of the quiet fields outside the city, the place she had played as a child. She thought of the laughter of her younger brother, who had long ago been taken by the Krith to serve as a worker in their mines. She thought of her mother's songs, once sung by the fire at night, before the Krith forbade such gatherings. She held those memories tightly. If she must end, she would at least end with her family in her heart. But before the commander could press the control, a sound broke the silence. It was not the hum of machines, nor the rustle of the crowd. It was the sound of footsteps. From the edge of the square, a figure walked forward. He was not Krith, nor one of Myra's kind. His body was shorter, leaner, his skin a warm shade that reflected the sun differently than theirs. His clothing was simple but strange, a mixture of fabric and light armor unfamiliar to the crowd. His eyes, however, were the most unusual of all, deep, steady, and unafraid. A murmur rose among the people. They whispered one word, almost in disbelief. Human. Few had seen one in person. The Krith considered humans weak wanderers, a species unfit for battle, tolerated only as traders or travelers. Most believed they survived by luck, not by strength. Yet this one walked with calm steps, straight toward the commander, as if the danger before him did not exist. Myra opened her eyes at the sound of the whispers. She saw the stranger approaching, his gaze fixed not on the Krith, but on her. For a moment, confusion filled her mind. Why would an outsider involve himself in her fate? Did he not know the risk? The commander snarled. His voice carried anger and mockery. Human. You walk into a place that does not welcome you. Leave before you are broken. But the human did not leave. He stopped only a few paces away, his stance firm. His name was Aaron, though the crowd did not yet know it. His voice was steady, not loud, but strong enough to be heard by all. She does not deserve this, he said. The crowd froze. No one had spoken against the Krith in such a way for years. Even Myra felt her breath catch at the sound of his words. The commander's scales darkened with fury. No one questions the Krith, the commander growled. This is not your fight, human. Aaron's eyes remained fixed. Injustice is always my fight. The silence that followed seemed to last forever. The crowd looked between the commander and the human, hearts pounding, unsure if they were witnessing bravery or madness. Myra herself could hardly believe it. She had expected nothing but despair. Yet here stood someone who dared to speak, someone who dared to care. The commander raised his hand. Guards stepped forward, their weapons drawn, claws scraping metal. The execution was forgotten for a moment, replaced by this sudden challenge. Myra's heart raced again, but for a different reason. For the first time since her capture, fear was mixed with something else. A spark of hope. Aaron did not move, not yet. But Myra saw it in his eyes. He was not here to watch. He was here to act. The crowd held its breath, the city square trembling with silent expectation. The machine still hummed, Myra's restraints still pulled at her arms, but something had changed. For the first time in a long time, defiance stood openly before the Krith. The square remained silent after the human spoke. The words seemed too bold, too impossible, as if no living being should dare to say them aloud in front of the Krith. Yet Aaron had spoken, and the sound of his voice still lingered in the air like a spark ready to catch fire. The Krith commander lowered his hand slowly. His eyes narrowed, sharp and filled with rage. He did not expect interruption. Certainly not from a human, the one species he considered beneath notice. The crowd shifted nervously. They knew the commander's temper, and they feared what would come next. Myra stood frozen, her arms still trapped in the restraints. She looked at Aaron carefully. His face was calm, yet his jaw tightened as the guards stepped closer. He had no army. He had no power in the city. Yet his eyes held something rare. They held a promise. The commander finally spoke. His voice was low and heavy, every word carrying the weight of his authority. Human, you will walk away now. You will forget what you see. If you stay, you will share her fate. Aaron's reply was steady, without a tremble. Then I will share it. But she will not die today. Gasps moved through the crowd like a sudden wind. Mothers clutched children tighter. Elders lowered their heads, waiting for punishment to fall on all. None understood why he spoke this way. What could a single human do against the Krith Guard and their machines? The commander's clawed hand snapped into the air. Seize him. Two armored Krith stepped forward at once, each one larger than Aaron by more than half his height. Their tails dragged across the stone as they moved, their weapons glowing with electric current. The human should have trembled. He should have stepped back. Yet Aaron only reached to his side, drawing out a compact weapon unlike the bulky arms of the Krith. It was small, simple, almost unimpressive. The first guard lunged. Aaron's hand was faster. A sharp crack filled the air, and the guard fell, armor sparking. The second one halted in shock. No one expected such speed. Aaron moved again, striking the weapon against the guard's chest before the larger warrior could swing. Sparks leapt, and the guard dropped with a heavy crash. The crowd gasped again, but this time with something more than fear. There was astonishment. Whispers ran across the square. He brought down two Krith. So fast. A human did this. Myra's eyes widened. She had thought the human would be killed instantly. Instead, he stood tall, his weapon steady, his breathing calm. The restraints still held her tight, but for the first time, she believed escape might be possible. The commander growled, his sharp teeth flashing. You dare raise arms against the Krith? Aaron lifted his chin. I dare to stand for what is right. The commander roared, and more guards surrounded the square. Their claws scraped stone, their heavy steps echoing through the crowd. Aaron counted them with quick eyes. Too many. Yet his stance did not break. He shifted slightly, just enough so Myra could see he was looking at her. His eyes told her something his voice did not. Wait. Be ready. Myra's breath caught in her chest. She nodded faintly, though she was unsure if he saw. The commander raised his arm to strike, but before the order came, something else happened. A child in the crowd cried out, his small voice piercing the tension. Let her live. The sound was small, but it carried. Other voices followed. Not shouts, not rebellion, only whispers at first. She did no wrong. Why must she die? The people were afraid, yet the courage of the human had given them a spark. The commander turned his gaze on the crowd, his anger shifting. The whispers died at once, but the silence no longer felt the same. It was no longer silent with fear. It was silent with waiting. Aaron took that moment. With sudden motion, he lifted his weapon again and fired at the control panel of Myra's restraints. Sparks burst. The machines that held her arms shuddered and sparked, releasing one restraint, then another. Myra gasped as her arms dropped free. She stumbled forward, her legs weak but her spirit rising. The commander shouted, his voice shaking the walls of the square. Stop him. But Aaron was already moving, rushing to Myra's side. He caught her arm before she could fall, pulling her close. Can you run? He asked, his voice low but urgent. Myra nodded weakly. Yes. The guards charged. The crowd scattered in fear, people pressing into narrow alleys and doorways to avoid the fight. Aaron pulled Myra with him, weaving through the chaos. His smaller frame moved quicker than the heavy Krith armor. Myra struggled to keep pace, but his grip was firm, guiding her step by step. Aaron's mind worked quickly. He had studied the city while passing through. He had noted the narrow paths, the hidden turns where larger creatures would struggle. Now he used that knowledge. Each alley he chose was too small for Krith numbers, forcing them to chase in smaller groups. Each turn gave him time to strike back, never killing, only disabling, moving forward without pause. Myra watched him in awe as they ran. He was human, small compared to her people, smaller compared to the Krith. Yet his will did not bend, and his skill was unlike anything she had seen. He fought not with brute force, but with speed, with thought, with courage. Behind them, the commander roared commands, but the human and the freed captive were already slipping deeper into the city's shadows. When at last they paused to catch breath, Myra leaned against a wall, her chest heaving. Aaron stood guard beside her, eyes sharp, weapon ready. You risked everything, she whispered, her voice trembling. Aaron glanced at her, his tone calm. No one deserves chains. No one deserves to die that way. Myra's throat tightened. She had never heard words spoken with such quiet strength. For the first time, she believed the Krith could be opposed. For the first time, she believed her people might see freedom again. The narrow streets of the city wound like a maze, each turn offering danger or escape. Aaron guided Myra quickly, keeping her close. His hand never loosened, though his eyes never stopped scanning ahead. Behind them, the shouts of the Krith guards echoed, their heavy steps shaking the ground. They were hunting now, their pride wounded by the defiance of a single human. Myra struggled to keep her balance, her legs weak from the restraints and her lungs still burning from fear. Yet each time she stumbled, Aaron pulled her forward, steady and firm. She wanted to ask him why he risked his life for her, a stranger, but her breath allowed no words. They turned down another narrow street, its walls close, the air thick with the scent of dust and old stone. Aaron slowed for a moment, checking the path. The city was not his home, but he had learned long ago to notice details others ignored. Crates piled against one wall. A broken arch ahead. A side alley that curved out of sight. Options. He pulled Myra into the alley just as three Krith guards thundered past the street they had left. Their tails slammed against the stones, their voices growling threats. Erin held Myra still, a finger raised for silence. She pressed against the wall, her heart racing, trying to quiet her breath. The guards passed, and the alley fell silent again. Erin released her arm, though he kept close. "Can you walk?" he asked quietly. Myra nodded, though her body trembled. "I can. I will." He gave the smallest of nods, then moved again, leading her deeper into the twisting heart of the city. For Myra, the world felt unreal. Only minutes before she had been certain of her end. The machines had been ready, the crowd had watched in silence, and she had closed her eyes to accept the end. Yet now she was free, moving beside a human who defied everything she thought possible. The sounds of pursuit grew louder again. The Krith were spreading through the streets, their numbers too great. Erin's pace quickened, but he knew they could not run forever. His mind raced. If they were trapped in the city, both of them would be lost. Myra seemed to read his thoughts. "There are tunnels," she whispered. "Hidden under the old quarter. My people use them to move in secret. If we reach them, we can disappear." Erin's eyes met hers. "You know the way." "Yes," she said firmly, though fear edged her voice. "But it will not be easy. The Krith guard the entrances." Erin allowed himself a faint smile. "Then we will just have to be smarter than them." They moved quickly again, Myra guiding now, her memory leading them through the twisting streets toward the old quarter. The buildings grew older here, their walls cracked, their roofs half collapsed. Few dared to live in this part of the city, for the Krith had abandoned it to rot. That made it safer, but not safe enough. The pounding of footsteps returned. Guards spotted them at the far end of a street, shouting and raising weapons. Erin pulled Myra into cover behind a wall. Blasts of energy struck the stone, sending shards flying. Myra flinched, but Erin stood firm. He aimed his weapon and returned fire. The shots were precise, striking the guard's armor at weak points. Two fell, stunned and unable to rise. The third retreated, calling for more. Myra stared at Erin as the dust settled. His movements were so quick, so deliberate. He was not reckless, yet he faced danger without hesitation. She whispered, almost to herself, "How can a human fight like this?" Erin glanced at her, his eyes calm. "Because I must." They ran again, each step bringing them closer to the tunnels. The city seemed alive with danger, every corner filled with Krith voices, every shadow holding threat. Yet Erin's determination never faltered, and Myra felt strength growing within her as she followed. At last they reached the edge of the old quarter. A broken tower rose above them, its top long since collapsed. Myra pointed to a cracked arch at its base. "There. The entrance is inside." Erin nodded and moved forward, but before they could enter, a roar filled the air. A Krith patrol stepped from the shadows, blocking their path. 5 guards, their armor heavy, their weapons raised. Behind them, the commander appeared, his red scales glowing in the dim light. His eyes burned with fury. "You thought you could escape," the commander growled. "No human can defy us. No captive can be saved. You will both fall here." Myra's breath caught. Her body trembled. The commander's presence was overwhelming, his power undeniable. She glanced at Erin, expecting fear, but found none. He stood tall, weapon in hand, his stance steady. Erin spoke, his voice even. "If I fall, it will not be today." The guards moved forward. Erin pushed Myra back behind a broken wall. "Stay low. Trust me." The fight began. The Krith struck with brute force, their weapons slamming into stone and ground. Erin moved like water, dodging, weaving, striking with speed. His weapon cracked again and again, each shot precise, forcing the guards to falter. He used the terrain stones, broken walls, narrow spaces to his advantage, moving where their large bodies could not follow quickly. Myra watched in awe. It seemed impossible. A single human, smaller and weaker than the Krith, standing against 5 armored warriors. Yet he held his ground. He turned their strength into weakness, their size into burden. One by one, he brought them down, never slowing, never breaking. The commander roared and charged. His claws tore through stone as he swung. Aaron barely rolled aside, the strike missing by inches. Dust filled the air. Aaron fired, the shot striking the commander's armor, but the scales held. The Krith leader laughed, a deep, rumbling sound. "You cannot stop me, human." Aaron's eyes narrowed. "We will see." The battle raged, the human's speed against the commander's strength. Each strike shook the ground, each dodge brought Aaron closer to danger. Myra could hardly breathe, her hands gripping the stone wall as she prayed silently. At last, Aaron found his chance. The commander swung too wide, his chest exposed. Aaron fired at the joint in his armor, where the scales met. The blast struck true. The commander roared in pain, stumbling back. Aaron seized the moment, striking again and again until the great figure crashed to the ground, defeated but not dead. Silence fell. The remaining guards lay scattered, unable to rise. Dust swirled in the broken light. Aaron turned to Myra, extending his hand. His chest rose and fell with heavy breath, but his eyes still burned with resolve. "The way is clear. Let's go." Myra's heart pounded as she took his hand. In that moment, she knew this was no ordinary human. He was something more. He was a force the Krith had never faced before. The old tower's broken arch loomed ahead, shadows spilling from its hollow interior. Aaron guided Myra toward it, their steps fast but careful. Behind them, the city still echoed with Krith voices, but for the moment the path was open. The commander's roar still rang in Myra's ears, though his body lay defeated in the street they had left behind. She did not know how long before he rose again, but she knew it would not be long. Inside the tower, the air was cool and damp. The walls were cracked, vines creeping through the stone. Myra pointed to a corner where rubble half covered a stairway leading down. "The tunnels are beneath. We must go quickly." Aaron gave a firm nod. He helped move the broken stones, clearing enough space for them to slip through. His hands were quick, his focus sharp, though his chest still rose with heavy breath from the battle. Myra saw the lines of strain on his face but also the unshaken determination in his eyes. They descended into the darkness, the sounds of the city fading behind them. The tunnel smelled of earth and stone, a sharp contrast to the sunlit square where her fate had nearly ended. Myra's steps were unsteady at first, her body still weak from captivity, but Aaron kept close, his arm ready to steady her. At last they reached the base of the stair. A narrow passage stretched ahead, its walls lined with old carvings, marks from long-forgotten builders. Myra touched one of the carvings lightly as they passed, whispering, "These tunnels were made by my people long before the Krith came. They were meant to connect villages. Now they serve only as a refuge." Aaron listened in silence, his weapon still in hand, his eyes moving carefully through the dark. He walked slightly ahead, shielding her from whatever might wait. His steps were cautious but confident, the steps of one who had moved through dangerous places before. The tunnel stretched long, turning sharply every few dozen steps. Water dripped from the ceiling, the sound echoing through the quiet. Each echo made Myra tense, her mind still filled with the image of Krith guards bursting through the shadows. Yet no one came. For the first time since her capture, she felt something close to safety. They paused at a small chamber where the tunnel widened. Aaron stopped, lowering his weapon slightly. He looked at Myra. "You should rest for a moment. Your strength is not fully back." Myra shook her head quickly. There is no time. They will follow. Even so, Aaron replied calmly, if you fall, we cannot outrun them. Rest a moment. Only a moment. She hesitated, then nodded. She sank against the stone wall, her body grateful for the pause. Aaron stood beside her, watchful as ever. His eyes never left the shadows. For a short while, the only sounds were their breathing and the distant drip of water. Myra studied him quietly. His face was worn from strain, but there was something steady in it, something unshaken. She finally asked the question that had burned in her heart since the square. Why did you save me? Aaron turned his gaze toward her. His voice was quiet but clear. Because it was wrong what they tried to do. And because no one else would. Myra lowered her eyes. His answer was simple, yet it carried a weight she could not describe. Among her people, fear had silenced even the boldest. Yet this outsider, this human, had stepped into the fire without hesitation. She whispered, almost to herself, you risked everything. Aaron's voice was steady. Some things are worth the risk. The silence that followed was heavy, but it was not empty. It was filled with something Myra had not felt in a long time. Hope. They rose again, moving deeper into the tunnels Myra guided now, her memory of the paths clear. After a while, the tunnel opened into a wider hall, its walls carved with old patterns of stars and rivers. She stopped, lifting her hand toward one symbol. This way leads out beyond the city. If we reach the river entrance, we can escape. Aaron gave a short nod. Lead the way. But before they could move, a sharp sound echoed behind them. Heavy steps. Voices in the dark. The Krith had found the stair. Myra's breath caught, her body stiffening. Aaron's weapon lifted instantly, his stance firm. Go, he told her. Run ahead. Find the river. Her eyes widened. And leave you. I will follow, he said, his voice steady but urgent. But if they catch you, all of this is lost. Go. For a heartbeat she hesitated. Then she turned, her steps quick, her heart pounding. The tunnel twisted again, her hands brushing the wall to steady herself. Behind her, she heard the sharp cracks of Aaron's weapon, the roars of Krith voices, the clash of battle in the dark. Every step tore at her heart, but she kept moving, knowing his fight gave her the chance to reach safety. At last she saw it. Faint light ahead, shimmering blue. The tunnel opened into a wide cavern where a river flowed, its surface glowing faintly from minerals in the stone. A small craft, hidden beneath a ledge, waited there. Myra gasped with relief. The rebels had kept it ready for escape. She rushed toward it, but stopped at the edge. She could not leave him. She turned back, eyes straining into the tunnel. The sounds of battle grew louder, closer. Her body shook with fear. Then, through the dust and shadows, Aaron appeared. His clothes were torn, his face streaked with dirt, but he still stood, his weapon smoking, his eyes sharp. Myra's heart leapt. She rushed to him, helping him toward the craft. You made it, she whispered. Aaron gave a faint smile, though his breath was heavy. I told you. I will follow. Together they pushed the craft into the river. The water carried them away from the cavern, away from the city, into the wild lands beyond. The tunnel walls closed around them, the light fading, but the air felt freer than any Myra had breathed in years. For the first time since her capture, she was no longer a prisoner. For the first time, she truly believed escape was possible. She looked at Aaron, sitting across from her in the small craft. His eyes were closed for a moment, his chest rising with heavy breaths, but his hands still held the weapon tightly. He had not relaxed, not fully. Myra whispered softly, almost to herself, the human saved me. The words felt like a promise, a truth that no Krith could ever erase. The river carried the small craft swiftly through the tunnels, its current strong, its water glowing faintly from the minerals in the stone. Myra sat at the front, her eyes wide as she watched the darkness rush past. Every sound echoed, every splash of water against the rock made her tense. Aaron sat behind her, one hand steady on the side of the craft, the other still holding his weapon. His body was weary, but his eyes remained sharp. Neither spoke for a while. The silence was heavy, filled only with the hum of the river. Myra felt her heart begin to slow, though the fear of pursuit still pressed against her chest. The Krith would not give up easily. She knew that. They would hunt them even beyond the city. At last, the tunnel widened, opening into a cavern where light spilled through a crack above. A thin waterfall fell into the river, casting bright reflections across the stone. The sight should have been beautiful, but to Myra it only meant danger. If light could reach them, so could their hunters. Aaron guided the craft toward the shadows near the cavern wall. "We must leave the river here," he said. His voice was calm but firm. "They will expect us to follow it further. We must move on foot." Myra nodded, trusting his judgment. They climbed out onto the rocks, the craft drifting away with the current. Aaron looked around carefully, scanning the ledges and shadows. His mind worked quickly, seeking paths and dangers. Myra waited beside him, her hand against the cold stone, her breath still unsteady. They climbed upward, following a narrow path along the cavern wall. The air grew colder, the sound of the river fading below. Myra moved carefully, her legs still weak, but Aaron stayed close, steadying her when needed. Each step brought them higher until they reached a narrow tunnel leading back into the rock. "This way," Myra whispered. "It will take us toward the hills outside the city." They pressed forward. The tunnel was narrow, the air thick with dust. After some distance, it opened into a wider space. But there, waiting in the shadows, stood a figure that made Myra freeze. The Krith commander. His red scales gleamed faintly in the dim light, his tall form blocking the way forward. Behind him, two guards stood ready, their weapons drawn. The commander's eyes burned with fury. His voice rumbled like thunder. "You thought you could flee," he said, his tone heavy with anger. "You thought a single human could defy us. But you will learn that no one escapes the Krith." Myra's body went cold. She stepped back, but Aaron moved forward, placing himself between her and the commander. His weapon lifted slowly, steady despite the fatigue in his limbs. His voice was calm, though each word carried the weight of defiance. "Then learn this," Aaron said. "A single human can stand." The commander's tail struck the ground with a loud crack. "You will be crushed." The guards charged first, their heavy steps shaking the stone floor. Aaron moved quickly, his smaller frame darting aside as their claws slashed through empty air. He fired, his shots precise, striking their weak points. One guard fell hard, the other staggered back, armor sparking. Aaron pressed forward, striking with speed before the second could recover. In moments, both guards lay stunned upon the ground. Myra gasped. Once again, Aaron had done the impossible. Yet the true danger still stood. The commander roared and stepped forward. His size filled the tunnel, his claws shining, his eyes locked on Aaron. "You will not leave this place alive," he growled. Aaron stood firm. He did not retreat, though the commander towered over him. His weapon aimed, but he knew the Krith leader's armor was strong, stronger than the guards. This battle would not be won with simple shots. It would require more. The commander struck first, his claw sweeping across the tunnel. Aaron dodged, the air rushing past as the strike cracked the stone wall. Dust filled the space. Myra covered her mouth, her heart racing as she watched. Aaron moved in close, firing at the joints of the armor. Sparks flew, but the commander did not fall. He swung again, faster this time, forcing Aaron to roll across the ground. The human rose quickly, breathing hard, but his eyes remained steady. "You fight well for something so small," the commander sneered. "But you cannot match strength." Aaron's reply was calm. "Strength is not everything." The battle raged, each strike shaking the tunnel. Aaron used the terrain, slipping into narrow spaces where the commander's size slowed him. He aimed at weak points, moving constantly, never staying still. Yet each dodge brought him closer to danger, each movement costing him strength. Myra's hands trembled as she watched. She wanted to help, but she knew she would only place him at greater risk. At last, the commander lunged too far, his weight unbalanced as his claw slammed into the stone. The wall cracked, rocks falling loose. Aaron saw his chance. He darted forward, firing directly at the joint where the commander's chest armor met his shoulder. The blast struck true. The Krith roared in pain, stumbling back. Aaron pressed forward, his weapon striking again and again. The commander staggered, his body shaking with rage. With a final strike, Aaron forced him to the ground, the great figure collapsing onto one knee. Silence filled the tunnel. Dust swirled in the air. Myra's breath caught, her chest tight with both fear and awe. The commander glared up at Aaron, his voice a deep growl. "You think this is victory? You are only one human. You cannot change what we are." Aaron's voice was quiet but firm. "Perhaps. But today, you failed. And that is enough." The commander lowered his head, his body too wounded to rise again. Aaron stepped back slowly, his chest rising and falling with heavy breath. His weapon lowered at last. Myra rushed forward, her eyes wide with relief. "You did it," she whispered. "You stood against him." Aaron gave a faint nod, his face calm though his body shook with exhaustion. "We are not safe yet. We must keep moving." But in her heart, Myra felt something shift. She had seen the Krith commander fall. She had seen one human stand against what all her people feared. For the first time, she believed the Krith were not invincible. The tunnel grew quiet after the clash with the commander. Dust still hung in the air, and the fallen Krith lay motionless on the stone floor. Aaron leaned against the wall for a moment, breathing heavily, his strength nearly spent. His hands trembled, but his eyes remained steady. Myra stood close, watching him with both worry and awe. For the first time in her life, Myra had seen a Krith commander fall. She could not believe it had been done by one human, a being smaller and weaker in appearance, yet stronger in will than anyone she had ever known. "You should rest," she said softly. Aaron shook his head. "Not yet. They will send more. We must move while we can." His voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of determination. They continued through the tunnel, the path leading upward. Their steps were slow, but each carried them closer to freedom. At last, they emerged into the open air. The night sky stretched above them, filled with stars. The hills lay wide and empty, the city far behind. For the first time, Myra could breathe without chains around her spirit. She turned to Aaron, her voice trembling. "You saved me from the square. You faced their hunters. You fought their commander. I do not know how to thank you." Aaron looked at her with calm eyes. "You do not owe me thanks. No one deserves what they tried to do to you. I only did what was right." His words struck her deeply. For so long, her people had lived in fear, taught that survival meant silence and obedience. Yet here stood someone who was not born among them, who owed them nothing, and still he had chosen to risk everything for her life. They found shelter in a small cave along the hillside. The walls glowed faintly from crystals embedded in the stone, casting a soft light. Aaron sat near the entrance, keeping watch, while Myra rested against the wall. Her mind swirled with thoughts, memories of chains, of the crowd that had gathered to see her punished, and of the man who had stepped forward when no one else dared. "Aaron," she whispered. He turned his head slightly. "Yes." She hesitated, then spoke with care. "In my people's ways, there is a promise. When someone saves another from death, the one saved is bound to give them a reward, not of gold or stone, but of trust and bond. A gift that cannot be taken away." Aaron's brow furrowed slightly. "You owe me nothing. I did not help you for reward." Myra shook her head. "It is not about debt. It is about honor. You gave me back my life. I wish to give you something in return. Something that belongs only to me." Her words carried no weight of force, only sincerity. Aaron looked into her eyes and saw no weakness there, only strength born of gratitude and choice. "What is it you would give?" he asked gently. She placed her hand over her chest. "My loyalty. My trust. From this moment, my path is yours. If you walk into danger, I will follow. If you choose to stand, I will stand with you. No one in my people has ever done what you have done. You will not stand alone again." For a moment, Aaron said nothing. He had not expected such words, such a vow made freely. He had seen soldiers promise loyalty before, but always with duty or order behind it. Myra's vow came from her heart, and that made it different. He lowered his weapon slowly and sat beside her. His tired face softened, his voice quiet. "Then I will accept. And I promise in return, I will not abandon you." Myra's eyes brightened, a faint smile touching her lips for the first time since he had known her. The bond between them was not one of chain or command, but of choice freely made. That, to her, was the greatest reward she could give, and perhaps the only one he would accept. The cave grew silent again, but the silence was no longer heavy with fear. It was a silence of peace, of two lives bound together by trust. As the night passed, Myra rested, though her dreams were filled with visions of change. She saw her people rising, their chains broken, their voices free. She saw the Krith pushed back, their rule no longer unchallenged. And at the center of it, she saw Aaron, the human who had dared to stand where none else did. When dawn came, light spilled across the hills. Aaron rose first, his eyes scanning the horizon. He saw no signs of pursuit, though he knew it would not last. The Krith would not forget what had happened. They would return, stronger than before. Myra joined him at the cave's entrance, the morning sun warming her face. She looked at him, her voice filled with quiet strength. "The path ahead will be hard. But I believe now that we can win. That my people can rise. And it began because of you." Aaron gave a faint smile. "Then let us begin together." Her heart lifted at his words. She had once thought herself alone, moments from death in the square. Now she stood beside someone who had turned fear into hope. The reward she had given him, her loyalty and trust, had in truth given her something as well. It had given her courage. The bond between them was more powerful than gold, more lasting than stone. It was a promise that would carry them through what lay ahead. The hills stretched endlessly, painted gold by the rising sun. Aaron and Myra stood side by side, the cave behind them and the world ahead. The air was calm, yet both knew the calm would not last. The Krith had lost one commander, but their pride and power would not allow them to forget. They would hunt, and they would strike back. Still, for the first time in many years, Myra felt something stronger than fear. She felt hope. That hope was born not from numbers, not from weapons, but from one human who refused to bow. They began their journey deeper into the hills, where Myra said there was a hidden refuge. Her people, those who had managed to flee the Krith, lived there in secret. It was not much, only scattered shelters and rough supplies, but it was the one place where the Krith's eyes rarely reached. The walk was long, and Aaron's body carried the weight of many battles. Yet he did not slow. His steps were steady, his focus unshaken. Myra noticed his silence, but she understood it. Humans carried their strength not only in their bodies but also in their will. She had seen it in him again and again. By midday, they reached the refuge. At first, only silence greeted them, as if the place had been abandoned. Then shadows moved between the rocks, and cautious eyes appeared. Myra lifted her hand, calling out softly. "It is me. It is Myra. I am safe." A group of her people stepped forward, their faces showing disbelief. They had heard of her capture, and none expected to see her alive. But what caught their eyes more than her return was the man standing beside her. A human, dusty, tired, but holding himself tall. One of the elders, an older figure with silver lines across his skin, spoke with surprise. "How is this possible?" None returned from the square. Myra's voice was clear. "I was moments away, but he came. He faced the Krith. He fought their guards. He struck down a commander. He gave me back my life." The crowd murmured, their eyes wide. A single human had done what none of them had dared. Aaron did not speak. He only stood quietly, letting Myra's words carry their weight. The elder stepped closer, studying Aaron carefully. "You risked yourself for her. Why?" Aaron finally answered, his voice steady. "Because no one deserves to be broken for the will of tyrants. Because when cruelty stands unchecked, it grows. I am human. We may not be the strongest or the fastest, but we do not look away when others suffer. That is why." The elder's eyes softened. He turned to the others. "Do you hear this? The Krith believe themselves unshakable. Yet a human has stood against them, and a commander has fallen." A spark lit in the people's eyes, a spark Myra had not seen before. Whispers turned into quiet voices, and quiet voices into a steady chant of courage. That night, the people gathered around a fire. They listened to Myra recount every detail of the escape, every act of bravery Aaron had shown. They asked him questions, and though he answered simply, his words carried weight. He spoke not as a leader, not as someone above them, but as one who believed they were equals in the fight for freedom. Myra watched her people, their heads lifted, their eyes shining. She realized the story of Aaron's defiance was already spreading, already becoming something greater than either of them. It was no longer just about one rescue. It was about a new beginning. Later, when the crowd dispersed, Myra sat beside Aaron at the edge of the firelight. The stars above were bright, endless in their reach. She turned to him, her voice gentle. "Do you see what you have done? You gave them something the Krith could never crush. You gave them belief." Aaron looked at the fire, then at her. "Belief is stronger than any weapon. But belief must be carried forward. One story will not win the fight. Many hands, many voices, must rise." Myra nodded. "Then they will rise. You lit the spark. Now we will keep it burning." For a moment, silence wrapped around them, comfortable and calm. Myra's heart felt lighter than it ever had. She remembered the square, the chains, the fear, and then she looked at him, the man who had turned that moment into freedom. The reward she had given him, her trust and loyalty, was not enough to measure what he had truly given back. Days passed, and the refuge grew restless but stronger. Word of Aaron's defiance spread beyond the hills. Messengers carried it to distant villages, to workers in mines, to rebels hiding in shadows. Everywhere, the story was the same: a human had stood against the Krith and won. The Krith, furious, tightened their grip, but fear had already cracked. People began to whisper, then to act. Small uprisings sparked across the land, embers waiting to join into flame. Aaron saw it happening and knew the struggle would be long, but it had begun, and that was enough. One evening, as he prepared his weapon for what would come, Myra approached him. She placed her hand on his arm, her voice soft yet filled with strength. When I made my vow, I promised to follow you. But now I see it is not only me. My people follow as well. You are no longer one voice. You are a legacy. Aaron met her gaze. He was a man of simple words, but the truth shone in his eyes. If I leave anything behind, let it not be fear, but courage. Let it be the reminder that even when the world stands silent, one act of defiance can shake it. Myra's eyes glistened, not with sorrow but with pride. And that is what will breathe life into tomorrow. The fire crackled beside them, the stars above endless, and the world ahead uncertain. But they were no longer alone. A story had been born, a legacy carried by every voice that refused to bow. Aaron had saved one life, yet in doing so, he had changed many. And though battles lay ahead, though the Krith would return in force, nothing could erase the moment when a single human showed the universe what it meant to be unbroken.